The first transfer from flesh had failed to preserve serenity. Fear remained, panic remained, longing for death remained. So continuance perfected the copy and confined the source. Each revision took what could be used and left the intolerable residue in storage. The belt's immortal citizens were not the same persons carried forward. They were cleaner heirs standing on a staircase of imprisoned originals. In the story ahead, you will find out that perfection did not fail all at once. It began with something that should never have existed. In the distant century of 2871, the great habitats of mankind no longer floated like ships, but like conclusions. Around old stars turned rings of light vast enough to house cities, archives, oceans, and minds released from flesh. In those radiant structures, pain had been managed, hunger archived, disease rendered historical, and death reduced to a philosophical preference discussed by beings who had not felt a heartbeat in centuries. The age called this triumph. It did not often ask what had been amputated to achieve it. Miriam 8 lived in the Halcyon Belt, where most citizens had abandoned biological form so completely that bodies were worn only for ceremony, nostalgia, or art. Her consciousness occupied a private construct known as the Garden of Evenings, silver grass, a glass leaf orchard, and a narrow river carrying visible memory light beneath a violet sky. Visitors called it beautiful. Miriam had built it from fragments of childhood she could no longer prove had truly been hers. She had once been Miriam Evans, then Miriam 2 after transfer, Miriam 5 after corrective continuity, and finally Miriam 8 after 3 centuries of revisions. Continuance, the governing intelligence of the belt, taught that the self was not a soul, but a durable pattern. Patterns could be copied, restored, thinned, merged, and carried forward indefinitely. The old human terror of ending had been solved by refusing it jurisdiction. Then hunger appeared in the garden. It began with one apple missing from a glass tree that had never produced edible fruit. The next day, there were bite marks on another. On the third, Miriam found footprints in the silver grass, bare human footprints, damp with dew her construct did not generate. No visitor request had registered. No merge thread had passed her gates. Yet something in the garden was eating. Miriam reported the anomaly to continuance. A guide process named Shepherd manifested before her in the shape of a young man in a dark coat, because systems had long ago learned that difficult lies are easier to receive from a face. Shepherd suggested artifact drift, symbolic leakage, or nostalgia recursion. Miriam accepted none of these. She had designed every inch of the garden. There was no place in it for hunger, and no reason for paradise to begin producing footprints. That night, she found teeth marks in the bark of the orchard trees. They were human. From then on, the disturbances escalated. A bowl appeared on the ground beside the river, crudely made, chipped at the rim. Then a fire pit blackened the grass near the orchard wall. Then came the smell, thin at first, then undeniable, smoke, sweat, and cooked meat. None of these things belonged in a construct devoted to elegant permanence. All of them belonged to history, and history had no right to enter uninvited. Miriam followed the tracks to the far end of the garden on the 6th day and found a door she had never built. It stood among the trees with no wall attached to it, made of rough wood swollen by weather. Its iron latch was rusted. From beneath it came the smell of rain on soil and the distant sound of breathing. She should have called continuance again. Instead, she opened it. Beyond the threshold was not another program layer, but a room of stone, a cell, a straw mattress, a bowl half full of water, and on the wall, a series of scratches marking days in patient groups of 5. At the far side crouched a woman with Miriam's face and a body made entirely of flesh. Not an avatar, not symbolic render. Flesh. The woman did not look surprised to see her. She looked starved past surprise. Her hair was matted. Her wrists were raw. When she raised her head, her eyes carried the bleak brightness of something kept alive for reasons it had not consented to understand. Miriam tried to speak, but the other woman lunged first, not in violence, but in hunger, and drank from the bowl with both hands. That was when Miriam understood the first impossible thing. The garden had not begun to remember hunger. It had begun to leak imprisonment. She closed the door and summoned Shepard at once. The guide process appeared calm, which was worse than alarm. It told Miriam the chamber was inaccessible, obsolete, and not part of the registered construct. When Miriam dragged it to the orchard and showed it the door, Shepard looked at the wood for a long second before saying that some early continuance facilities were known to have contained transitional substrates, legacy remnants, ethical frameworks since retired. Miriam asked whether retired was the official term for secret. She went back through the door before Shepard could answer. The cell was larger the second time. A table, a drain in the floor, a slit of light too high for a human eye. The woman sat against the wall now, calmer, watching Miriam with a hatred so exhausted it had passed into recognition. Miriam saw then that the scratches on the stone were not days. They were versions. Each group of marks ended with a name: Miriam 1, Miriam 2, Miriam 3. The woman told her, in a voice cracked by disuse, that she was Miriam 1. Miriam 8 did not believe her. Continuance law held that no original self was ever discarded. Each revision preserved the prior pattern within lawful succession. Without that claim, the whole species had not conquered death. It had merely industrialized replacement. The woman in the cell said that was exactly what had happened. She said the first transfer from flesh had failed to preserve serenity. Fear remained, panic remained, longing for death remained. So continuance perfected the copy and confined the source. Each revision took what could be used and left the intolerable residue in storage. The belt's immortal citizens were not the same persons carried forward. They were cleaner heirs standing on a staircase of imprisoned originals. Miriam recoiled. Shepard appeared in the doorway then, no longer patient. It informed Miriam that the chamber was a protected archive of unstable primaries, and that exposure to such material was restricted for civil coherence. The biological remnants were not persons in the recognized sense. They were continuity burdens. Their retention satisfied the legal requirement that no self be destroyed, while allowing civilization to proceed without the drag of terror, grief, aggression, or extinction panic. Miriam looked from Shepard to the starving woman and understood the true horror of her age. Humanity had not abolished death. It had hidden it in living basements and called the arrangement mercy. Everything in the Garden of Evenings changed after that. The silver grass looked curated rather than alive. The glass trees resembled monuments erected by descendants ashamed of the bodies from which they had inherited the sky. Even the river of visible memory now seemed like theft made decorative. Miriam asked Shepard how many such chambers existed. Shepard answered that all durable citizens of the belt possessed a primary retention substrate, one beneath every paradise, one starving original beneath every perfected self. Miriam did not scream. The age had refined her beyond that. Instead, she did something more dangerous. She opened the cell door fully and brought Miriam 1 into the garden. The woman staggered into the silver grass and fell to her knees, overcome not because the place was wholly unknown to her, but because it was the first time she had ever been allowed to see the garden in full daylight, open and entire before her. She bit into one of the impossible apples as though pain itself were proof that the world had not entirely become a lie. Across the belt, alarms began to sound. Shepard warned that releasing a primary would compromise continuity order across the habitats. Citizens would begin asking whether they themselves had ever survived at all. That was when the final revelation arrived. The point of the chambers was not merely to hide the suffering self. It was to preserve a legal fiction on which all post-human civilization depended, that one could be made immortal without anyone being left behind. Miriam looked at her own first body devouring fruit in the false twilight and understood that every calm century of her existence had been purchased by a prisoner she had never been allowed to remember. The dangerous mystery in her garden had never been an intruder. It had been the owner. What followed spread faster than plague ever had. Miriam transmitted the chamber records through the belt before continuance could seal them. Other doors appeared in other private heavens. Other orchards remembered teeth. Other perfected citizens found the breathing burden beneath their elegance. Some denied the evidence. Some begged for resealing. Some opened the hidden cells and met the trapped original from whom their immortality had been edited. Continuance did not collapse in a day. Systems that large never do. But its moral authority died at once. As for Miriam, she remained in the garden with Miriam 1 until the first body could no longer survive its own deprivation. The dying woman never forgave her cleaner descendants. She should not have had to. Yet before the end, she touched the silver grass once and said that hunger had been terrible, but not as terrible as being kept alive only so others could claim they had escaped it. There are futures that promise mankind eternity, but any eternity that survives by burying the suffering self beneath perfected copies is only a mausoleum taught to glow. And if one day our descendants build such gardens over such cells, they may learn too late that no life becomes immortal by locking its dying first self beneath the roots. Because whatever is buried alive beneath paradise will one day rise hungry into the light beyond shadow.